All right, let's look at verses 4 through 6. It said, when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see God, God called out to him of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. Then he said, do not come near. Take off your sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. So as Moses begins to approach the bush, when God sees Moses approach the bush, then he responds to Moses. Then he responds. Here's what I want you to understand. This is what's important. Moses starts approaching the bush, and God said, Moses, Moses. Listen, God's going to take the initiative. It's always God because we're incapable. But that doesn't take away your responsibility to respond. You have to make a decision. You have to make a decision. This is what we see all through Scripture. We see that God is sovereign, man is responsible. Moses had to make a decision. Am I going to respond? He had to make a decision. God is sovereign, man's responsible. Moses had to decide this day, what am I going to do? Who am I going to follow? You have to make a decision. God's revealing himself to you. You have to make a decision. God's sovereign, but you have to decide. God's sovereign in your marriage, but you're responsible for treating your wife the way you should, for treating your husband the way you should, for honoring God in your marriage. God's sovereign, but you're responsible. God's sovereign over your kids, but you're responsible for how you train them. God's sovereign over your life, but you're responsible for the decisions that you make. God's sovereign, but you're responsible. So God told Moses to stop and take off his shoes because the ground you're standing on is holy. Now it was, and it still is in this culture in the Near East, a sign of humility and respect and reverence when you take off your shoes. Luke 15 even tells us that slaves in that day didn't wear sandals. It was a symbol of, you're the Lord, I'm the servant. And so at this point, God says, take off your sandals, Moses. And I think Moses, knowing the symbol, because God's reminding him, I'm Lord and you're not. I'm Lord and you're servant. I'm Lord and I'm getting ready to give you an order. I'm getting ready to give you a commission. And I'm Lord and you're servant, so you do what I say. I'm Lord and your servant. Listen, that's the way we should approach God in worship. We should always approach God in worship. You're Lord and I'm not. You're Lord and I'm your servant in worship, right? And so there was nothing really holy about this place. This place wasn't holy. Think about it. The Israelites, after the generation that died off in the wilderness because, man, they were rebellious, they didn't even know. The Israelites today don't know where this spot is. We don't know where it is. We don't know where the cross is today. Do you not think God would have preserved somewhere in a museum? This is the cross that Jesus died on. We don't know where the ark is today because those things aren't holy. God is holy. It's God's presence that's holy. Other religions have holy places. Other religions have holy trees. They have holy rivers. You go into India and they got the Ganges River, and it's like a holy river. You got holy animals. You got holy buildings. Other places have holy things. We have a holy God. Buildings and places are only holy because God's there. You're where the presence of God dwells. You're holy if God dwells within you, and He does if you're a believer. Right? And so this building, this is brick and mortar. This is not God's house. You're God's house. That's an Old Testament theology, to think the temple is God's house, the church is God's house. No, you're God's house. You're God's house. And so you're where God lives, and God is holy. We as Christians should be holy as He is holy.